Hey.
Good morning. This is Luke Renda, and I'm here today with my good friend Martin Comtois of the Healer and the Dreamer Astrology. And today,
Hello.
hey Martin, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm good. Yourself?
Good. It's a nice foggy morning here.
Really deeply foggy in Duncan. Yeah, and where
Yeah,
you're in Quadra, so the fog extends from Quadra down to here.
yeah, crazy, eh?
That's a lot of fog.
It's a couple hundred kilometers of fog.
It really does feel foggy in my mind too.
Socked in.
Yep.
So today I thought because there's new people to my channel and it's probably been a while since you've sort of discussed your background and stuff. I was wondering if you wanted to do sort of a brief introduction of where your practice is now, but if we could go back into history to see how those seeds got germinated and how you got into this whole thing.
I'd love to do that. I haven't really done that on my channel either, so that'll kind of give some background to people who are following me.
So do you want to give a brief introduction of just what you provide for your clients and your practice and stuff like that? And I'll put all the links below to your sites and channel and stuff afterwards in the description.
A brief overview of what I offer. Well, I think there's two components to my practice. There's and I think to every astrologer, well, not to every astrologer, some astrologers, well, there's so many different types of astrologers, so we won't get into that. But I find that my service is twofold. One is to comment on the times. So the astrological commentary on what we're going through as a collective. And so for that, I do a new moon and full moon report. I do a solely lunar inspiration video series that deals with the new moons and the full moons, but I also do some long range forecast. I have a video, a webinar coming next week that is going to be about 2022 and beyond and how we got here. So a long view of the times. So the commentary on the times is a big part of what I do. And then the second is to do individual readings. I do natal chart readings, transit readings. I do synastry, relationship readings. And there's something quite unusual about my practice is that I integrate the psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. So I come from a alchemical perspective. Jung's work on alchemy has greatly affected me. That's how I came with the word, the branding of the healer and the dreamer astrology. The healer and the dreamer astrology point to an archetypal transformation that's going on, where how we relate with the masculine, the sun, the healer, and the feminine, the moon, the dreamer. And so it's the healer and the dreamer is an alchemical Jungian perspective to astrology. And so then what I do when I work with clients is I ask them to keep a dream journal leading to their session. And then I do the astrology session, the astrology reading, and then I use the material to confirm the reading, kind of gives you a check and balance kind of system. And then I continue work with the individual kind of in a Jungian mode where I support them through the techniques of dream analysis, always using astrology as a kind of a balance between the two. And it's very much like Jung used to do himself. And also Liz Green in her work. Liz Green was a Jungian analyst herself, and she wrote a tremendous amount on on astrology, but also some on dream analysis, but also on Jung as well. So that's kind of my background, and that's what I offer, just in a nutshell.
Cool. Yeah, and you've had a few different iterations of your work over the years. You were the mountain mystic at one point, I remember. And
Hmm.
yeah, so things have come a long way for you. And so how long ago was it that you first were introduced to astrology?
Well, there's, I'm an older fellow, so I've been at it for a while. I've been a practicing astrologer for 12 years now. This is my 13th year. Been, in the interior of BC, and then just recently moved to Vancouver Island. And um, most of my practice was person to person, doing workshops and festivals and the likes, where I did work with people on a one-to-one basis and in groups. And then with this current crisis, I moved a lot online, a lot more online, but I'm looking forward to, again, being a grassroots kind of person that meets people on the ground in person. I really miss personal contact like we all do. Um,
Mhm.
but prior to that, I came to astrology right after, well, just during my Saturn return. 28 years old, I took my first class in astrology in Montreal. That's after I just left. I lived in a monastery for 10 years in the Hare Krishna movement. And so I was introduced to techniques of yoga and meditation and practices and the philosophy of Hinduism. And then when I left the Krishnas, then I kind of wanted some perspective into my life journey so far. And so I took this 16-week course. That was my first experience, learn how to draw a charts. At that time, we drew charts manually, making all kinds of calculations to get to the chart. I wish I still remembered how to do that and kept all my notes from that. I don't do that anymore. Of course, we're in the internet age and we can have a chart at the click of a moment. So that really has made astrology much easier. But yeah, that's when I first started. And then I kind of sat on it and was a cook for a long time, cooked for festivals and cooked for restaurants. And I had my own restaurants. And then for about a 20-year career in the restaurant business. And then and then at the end there, after all my restaurants, one after the other, have failed. And my last one, I went bankrupt, but the one before that burnt down, and the one before that got flooded. And I had a little farm in Hawaii, and that got a hurricane. So it became really clear that I needed to do what I really was passionate about, and that was astrology. And then as I became an astrologer, then my studies of Carl Jung really became a passion. And now I lecture in for Jungian societies as well as on astrology, various subjects, and put it all together. It's quite an interesting little practice that I have.
So with this 16-week course that you took, were you just walking around Montreal and you saw a flyer? Did you go and were you searching out an astrology course? How did you come to find that?
Just a little column on a bulletin board in a laundromat, I think, or something like that. It's just, fate has its way, and it was and in my background in Eastern philosophies and Hinduism and like that, one would have thought that I would have taken a Vedic astrology course, but no. I was much more interested in the psychological aspect of Western astrology. And with hindsight now, because of my real passion for Carl Jung's work, it became really clear that in the psychological alchemical approach to um, you know I would say Jungian astrology, or archetypal astrology, has really been what's been driving me to deepen my own practice.
Right. Yeah, it's like the part of the Western magical tradition, right? Rather than an Eastern philosophical one.
Exactly. Yeah.
More suiting to your background and everything like that, I guess.
Well, I think they're more suited to the Western mind, but again, what drives the bus for me is Carl Jung's work. I have you see it in the background there. That's the collected works, all those black volumes there, and those are all biographies of Carl Jung and his work. And then I have his red book too, and the it's a fascinating perspective to the psychology, and so I approach a astrology as a psychological science, and then my techniques are very much steeped into Jung's work, so that in a sense to come to me is kind of, people come to me and they're always surprised by how deep the session goes, how profound the work is. And that is the result of my Jungian studies. And what really defines my astrology more than anything is Jung's alchemical work. And so from Jungian perspective, alchemy and astrology are sister arts, so we have a conception of alchemy in our modern times, which is maybe not as deeply informed into the history of alchemy. And that's what the Jung's work gives us, volume 12, 13, and 14, and then some of volume 16. It's all about alchemy and how he went and who he studied, and the conclusions that he came and how it informed his psychology. Fascinating stuff. And it really transformed my astrology tremendously as I was practicing. And again, that was born out of the need to understand how the psyche works, because astrology is such a tool that it allows you to penetrate into the psychic economy of an individual so rapidly. You get to understand them. You have um, a perspective that helps you understand the individual. And so it's a tremendous aid for psychological analysis. And that's why Jung used it. And then that's how I use it as well.
Yeah, I know that there are many psychologists actually who sit with an astrological chart while they're doing analysis with their patients, and then they refer to the chart to see, oh, this is what they're going through, and it's a big aid for them to see the process of the individual. And
From the very beginning of Jung's career, he was the same. He started studying astrology when he was 28, 29. He writes letters to Freud about it. He actually got his first astrology reading, chart reading, from a disciple of Freud who had studied astrology. And so throughout his career, and then Jung even taught his daughter how to calculate the charts because it was too troublesome for him. So he had Greta learn to do charts for him. And then Greta, of course, became an astrologer herself in the later parts of her life. And so, the Jungian astrology tradition is really, really rich. And throughout his work, he's always going into some digressions where he talks about astrology and alchemy and like that. So it's fascinating to see his perspective of it.
so, how long was it into your astrology practice before you found the work of Carl Jung?
Well, I had been studying Liz Green. Liz Green is a Jungian analyst, and so especially her work, Astrology of Fate, which is, probably one of the most important books of astrology. And then in Astrology of Fate, she uses dream analysis and chart analysis. She does some case material, some case studies. And so I studied that, 7 times. I read the Astrology of Fate 7 times. It's such a great book. and it's very Jungian in perspective. She studies faith from a Jungian perspective. So that was really, really important. I encourage everybody to read that book, and that's what got me started. But I've been studying astrology and Liz Green. I've read, everything that Liz Green wrote, and many of them many, many times. And so that's kind of what guided me. And then when my last business went bankrupt, then I kind of had a vision quest and became clear that I was going, whether I was poor or rich, I would be an astrologer, and I just would stick to it. And so and so then when I got into doing astrology and readings, that's when I devised my table. I wanted a tool to teach astrology. So I got my table and I started traveling and doing workshops everywhere and started doing readings. And in the work itself, when you're doing analysis, and that's really, where your astrology really becomes personal, is the experience that you have with the individuals. And I found that I was able to bring people to catharsis meaning a real, moving experience of understanding why they're struggling with what they're struggling. And catharsis in Greek means washing away, so that experience of crying, when people ask me, what did you do? Oh, I make people cry. And so I found that you can bring catharsis to people really easily, because astrology revealed the nuts and bolts of why we are the way we are and why we struggle with the things we are, especially in regards to our parental and our ancestral lineage. And so you have that window to the soul that is open to astrology, and I could bring people to a real catharsis, but then I didn't have any tools to get them past that and to get them to the point where they could integrate and work with it. And it's very terrifying. You come to a place of a catharsis, which is a real close, sometimes catharsis and psychosis, are very, very close. And you can, and so you get to these places where, in the work that were kind of terrifying. I've had many, many readings in the past that really forced me to take seriously what I was doing. And I think that that's, for young astrologers, take the time to mature in your practice before you offer services. Don't jump into it, because and Jung talks about that. He says, um, if you're not careful, you'll trigger a psychosis in a person. If the person has a latent psychosis, you can actually invite a breakdown. And then what do you do with that breakdown? How do you give them the tools? How do you approach that with confidence? Requires a tremendous amount of maturity. And so then after a number of those experiences, then I said, well, I need to go, to the source. And then I started collecting Jung's books. I started reading them. I started doing dream analysis and a dream practice and active imagination for myself, and started teaching those tools. And so now I feel that I can approach a reading with to bring people down to these catharsis, and to have, like I was describing to one of my clients the other day, what is my job? I'm kind of hang around the door to hell, and I take you down and then help you take all, inventory of what's going on, in your unconscious, and help you, transform it into empowerment. And so in that way, Jung's work is so helpful in helping you manage the growth process, the integration process, and the healing process of your clients, because really astrology is a healing art. It is a psychological art to help individuals understand themselves and why they are the way they are and what they are here to do, really, because understanding what we're here to do is really a big part of psychological integrity.
Well, with that breaking down process too, right? You're creating the catharsis, you're breaking down all that armoring, and then the person is left like very vulnerable, right? And so to be able to build them back up and give them the tools that they need to, you can be open, because there's that whole armoring that people have been repressing their whole lives and just building up this armor from when they were a kid, and to break all that away so suddenly, yes, it does leave them very vulnerable, and you have to be able to sort of build that back up in a healthier and more productive way. It's almost like that negredo albedo alchemical process, right?
Absolutely.
Transformation. Yeah, and also I guess astrology too would have indications of sort of what's the purpose of someone's life, where their potential lies, right? And that can help guide people to whole new careers, and just what is important to them in their life, right? And their soul's journey.
Well, case in point is our own experience, me and you together, when we met in Quadripalooza and, in the grass there, and I did my workshop, and then we made this connection, and then done 3-4 readings together, family readings, everything. And then now here we are, sharing the stage together, and we have, sister, brother relationship. And I find that happens with a lot of my clients, is that in time we become brothers and sisters in the art, and that's really, really quite satisfying to see us at this stage.
Well, it's sort of akin to your finding a flyer on the laundromat door that led you to this whole change in your life. Is I was just studying basically like symbol literacy and stuff like that, and I didn't know a whole lot about astrology. I knew a little bit, and then I heard you speak at Quadripalooza, and I was like, oh wow, this guy has taken it to like a deeper level of a symbolical meaning of this type of stuff. And then it's probably like you mentioned Liz Green's book, The Astrology of Fate, and The Dreamer of the Vine. So I read those books. I remembered the books, read them, and it was probably like a year or two later, I was like, I gotta learn more, because the Astrology of Fate was actually pretty advanced for someone just getting into the study. And I remember going to the Quadripalooza website, looking up, oh no, you weren't there at that year, it must have been another year. Look up, they had all the vendors listed, and then I found your little name and your email, so I sent out the email to you. And then it's like those little things, like why did I even look you up and do that, right? What motivated me to do that? And now here we are. It's probably been maybe 10 years since we first met, 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, probably 7 or 8.
Your practice has changed even since then. I remember talking to you a couple of years later, and it had already taken leaps and bounds of evolving, right? And it's just super cool. It's like you just gotta follow. I always say to people, you gotta follow those signs. Like these things happen for a reason. It's not just some random happening. If you pay attention to these certain signs, it's going to lead you somewhere meaningful.
Yes. Well, that's probably Jung's most important scientific contribution was this concept of synchronicity. And synchronicity developed with Wolfgang Pauli, who was a quantum physicist at the time, and they put forth the concept together in a little book where they shared their own realizations from a quantum physics and from a psychological perspective, and they saw quantum physics and psychology, Jungian psychology, being kind of sister arts. And then, that had been born from countless conversations with so many people, from Einstein to Hess to, Jung. Jung was part of a, spiritual and psychological movement, that is still felt today. And so this concept of synchronicity, points to an underlying psychic phenomena, and so in alchemy, that's called Mercurius. Mercurius is the prima matera, or Jung translates it into a concept called the transcendent function. And so we're always looking for the teacher without, but there is a teacher within, which is Mercury, the guide of souls, who always brings us, as always, whispers in our ears, go there, that's where you're looking for. And so even in my own studies of studying Jung, the right book would always show up at the right time. Everything just shows up at the right time. If we pray, if we look for guidance comes. And so um, that's something that we all experience.
It's kind of having that confidence in yourself to follow up on those synchronicities too, right? I call it like synchromysticism, like the practice of following up on these synchronicities. Because some people,
Yeah.
these things will happen and they'll ignore them and be like, ah, nah, and that's kind of like almost like denying the hero's journey in a way, right? And you're going to be on the path one way or another. You might as well listen to the signs and follow your inner guide.
Well, especially in these times that we're living through, the current narrative disempowers any kind of spiritual quest or mystical search, which really has been part of the human experience, since the dawn of humanity. We've always had an engagement with psyche, with soul, with what we call God, and or the gods, or the manifest. Jung made called them archetypes being psychic dominance. He looked at these as psychic dominance that populate the inner world, but also in history it populated the outer world. But in our demystification and de-spiritualizing of the world in what we call the Enlightenment, and it's only a couple hundred years old, really, this craziness that we're going through, and the dissociation from spirit, and the craziness that's unfolding now is really so then, because that voice of spirit can be so weak in an individual and be so overwhelmed by mass media, that we find this collective psychosis, this breakdown of psyche, because we have stopped trusting that inner voice that keeps guiding us. And so in our work, that's what we do. We strengthen that inner voice, we strengthen that inner connection, and through dream analysis, through astrology, through your studies, through what Jung called active imagination, we learn to connect with that voice and make that voice strong within us, and then we can be guided by that voice. And so, yeah, that's the essence of the process, and listening to that inner voice.
Yeah, so do you feel like because people are repressing these inner archetypal symbols and they're repressing these, like this archetype within them, because the archetype, as Jung describes it, is like a symbol forming structure. Like you never see the archetype, you just see the symbols that archetype is showing you, sort of like as a metaphor, so you can understand it better. Like, do you feel that repressing these inner archetypes allows them to sort of manifest almost in the collective in a way? Like, do you think that is a dynamic that's happening?
That's a complex question. That deep and complex questions. You open a hallway to,
Yeah.
that's a very long hallway with many doors. But yes, whenever something is repressed, whenever something that is real within us, and in childhood, we have a natural mystical side, and our system of education really, and our ambitious, materialistic system, makes us one-sided from the beginning, or at least represses that part of ourself. And so whenever something is repressed, it goes into the unconscious, and then in the unconscious, it becomes projected. So it doesn't lose its energy, but it needs to be expressed. So it becomes projected, but it's projected in the form of a shadow. So that we develop dislikes for individuals, or we develop a belligerent kind of personality, or and then again, this is a really complex, how dissociation works, and how projection works, and how all of that works. Basically, this repression creates a tension of energy that has to be expressed one way or the other, whether it's expressed in mental, or psychological complexes, or even in physical symptoms. And so, yes, the gods, now we call them, we call them, the different psychological diseases that we have, mommy issues, daddy issues, the issues that we have, abandonment issues, split personality, manic depressive, that's become our gods. They're the manifestations of inner psychic contents who are not understood, therefore they haunt us. And so then, and the greatest, psychological system that we have that is endured for thousands and thousands of years is astrology. And in astrology, you got, kind of a personification of these archetypes, and then we see them in the psyche of the individual. And so that's why astrology is so important. And I think that I probably didn't do such a good job of explaining that, but go ahead.
Did pretty good. But so you touched on something a minute ago when you said, like, from an early childhood age, you're learning the world is new to you, and you follow your parents and this and stuff. But when you get into school, it's like they teach you not to trust yourself and your own understandings of things, or just your ability to be able to figure it out on your own. And it's now you have to trust this expert. It's like everything becomes externalized from that point on. It's in this hyper materialistic way. That's why these inner practices, the dream work and stuff like that, really start teaching you to trust yourself again. And I think that is, like, especially in these times now, where it's like the cult of the expert is rampant, and the cult of the the diploma, and it's getting back to even to the point where it's like people won't even trust common sense anymore. They're like, oh, unless an expert verifies there's something that is so obvious that they just still need to go to an external authority figure in order to verify what they are feeling and know it's true inside them. It's gone completely rampant, even in the last like 4 or 5 years. I thought it was bad before.
Yeah. Well, that's what Jung's work is so valuable, is because he allows us to gain a perspective, an objective perspective on this collective dissociation that we see, this incredible one-sidedness of our society, who and we can see the one-sidedness in everything. We are so prone, completely convinced of the value of our materialism, that we're not willing to see the spiritual perspective. And so this dissociation is a few hundred years old, well, probably longer than that. And in the history of the human mind, you've always had this tendency to be one-sided, whether it's all about spirituality and then there's no scientific perspective, or it's all about scientific perspective and there's no spiritual perspective. It's to try to arrive at a marriage of the two, where we can really see that scientifically there are things that we cannot understand scientifically. And that's what psychology said. That's what Jung was confronted with, is like, here I am trying to prove things scientifically that are not provable scientifically. Well, or they're provable scientifically because we see, psychic experience manifest themselves, with individuals. And then Jung said, the scientific study of dreams gives us the best perspective, but also there's mythology, and there's, spirituality, theology. There is a great, great wide body of scientific um, material that points to something transcendent. And so we kind of have to have both. And if we don't have both, then we, in order to support our views, we have to repress the other side of our personality. And then whenever the other side of the personality is repressed, then a shadow has to be born. So in the past, we have the military industrial complex and pointing the finger to the other side, to the communist bloc, or to Germany, or to, there have always been big, big tensions where something evil is perceived in the other, which is just as bad in me, but I can point it to the other as being the guilty party. And then that one-sidedness and the need to reinforce that one-sidedness makes really us become kind of possessed by our own conviction, where we can't see the other person or the other perspective. And so then, these kind of conflicts exist between individuals, within their relationships, but these conflicts are also within the individual. And so then how can you live in a happy world and a peaceful world if within you are not happy and peaceful? And so then the onus becomes on the individual to achieve psychological balance. And then if you have a society of people who are psychologically balanced, then you'll have a psychologically balanced society. But you can't expect that to come out of our society right now because we're so one-sided. So, in essence, that's the struggle that we're going through at this time, is that there's such a desperate need for people who are psychologically balanced and who understand, spirit and science, and who can harmonize the two in their own lives. And so, that's what all of our work is about, really.
Yeah, I really see that with when they separated like astrology from astronomy. There's that split, whereas before it was always together, right? They had the astronomy, the study of the stars, the movement of the planets, all that stuff tied in together with the mythology, right? And it's almost like that happened with religion and everything else too. It's like they took spirituality out of religion, they took astrology out of astronomy, and it's a weird form of like they're trying to compensate for something that is like it's an internal lack, you know what I mean?
Well, and also separate the mysticism and spirituality from the act of healing. Not looking at healing as a spiritual practice. The very foundation of modern medicine is deeply, deeply spiritual individuals who develop, a conception, abilities to heal. And then now we're just completely negating all ancient traditions of healing, and countless experiences. And if we take spirituality out of healing, then we're just left with masks and syringes. What happened in the power of prayer, and what happened to the compassion, and the power of the healing herb, and how we can you know heal people through a better connection with earth. I think that that's what's the biggest problem, is we're ill as a society because we're dissociated from nature. And and then your hospitals are always going to be full. That's really the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a PhD biologist. He wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. And it was just about like the mental side of healing and all of that stuff. And one of his colleagues, Rupert Sheldrake, he wrote a book on like the morphogenetic field, and so he's tying in these spiritual concepts with science. Like that is one good thing that has sort of been coming around. But these guys have been talking about it for like 30, 40 years, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still almost unknown today in universities and hospitals. And yeah, it's a wild, man, this disassociation of things that were once whole. It's like we've compartmentalized these things that are meant to be whole, and it's created like a neurosis and an extreme form of a compensating.
Right, right,
And
right.
that's like when you look around today, it's so wild to see. Like it's like you're compensating for something, and then now it's triggering this like neurosis within you, and then yeah, you're projecting it out on everywhere else except for at yourself.
Yeah, and I think that that's really becomes the key to it all, because if you focus, on the big picture and you focus on everything that's going on in the world, then you can become, dissociated yourself. I think that what the main thing that these times are teaching us is the need for an engagement with that side of ourself that we call spirit, and so having a spiritual practice is what protects us from psychic infection and from the craziness of the world. And so, if we seek to heal the world that we're in, then we have to heal ourselves first. And that's most important in our own practice. And I think that that has to be the focus of the healing arts, is to heal the individual. And so when we do readings with people, when we do dream analysis with people, it's always with the focus of making sense to the individual of why they are dissociated and why they're struggling and why they're suffering, and to help them gain clarity into these inner voices that come through their dreams, and also that are expressed through the dynamics of their chart, and as they get to know themselves better and through practice. But that's something that we have to ourselves do, and that's, you were pointing out, how my practice has evolved. There's no way that you can keep doing this work without understanding that your own inner work is the most important thing you do. And if you become an example of the work that you teach, then your words and your work will have influence. And that kind of perspective is what's so needed. We can get all riled up to all of the symptoms of the craziness, or we can focus our energy on becoming healthy ourselves. And if we do that, then our actions speak louder than our words. And that's really
Much
important.
much more empowering, much, like when especially when you're focusing everything on out there, you're not going to change the world. You change it one individual at a time. And it's even like with this food crisis or with anything going on, right? It's like, well, how's your garden doing? Right? All that stuff, you can bring it back to yourself. And like the more like I always call it shoring up of the individual, the more shored up you are, these waves will just start crashing against it and you'll be unaffected, right? Like it's and that's you can only change your own life. You can't change anyone else's life, right? They have to change their own life, and you can aid with your practice and stuff. You can aid people and guide them and sort of help them along the way, but it's always comes back to being an individual process, and that's what I find so powerful about this type of work.
Well, and also I think that that's when community comes in, is that once you've done the work and you're really showing up and you're, you know, healing yourself and becoming a whole individual, then by synchronicity or by the force of spirit, your community comes around you, and you start feeling, like what we're doing together and what so many of us are doing. We're all part of a greater movement that's seeking to shift the collective narrative, but we have to nurture that narrative within ourselves and then within each other and form strong bonds. But only an individual that has done the work for himself, only that kind of individual can you really trust in your own relationships. And so that's those kind of bonds that we're seeking to create with each other. What the law of success called, the mastermind. We need each other, but we first of all need to be whole as individuals, then we can be whole as communities. But the community of neurotics, what Jung called the mass man, that's never going to bring about the solution to these problems that our age is facing.
What did he say in our thing? No amount of zeros will add up to a single whole.
That's right. That's right.
Right?
We did for our viewers, we did a series on the undiscovered self, and you should check this out. It's long, it's about 9 hours long, and it's 10 videos on the undiscovered self, which is one of Jung's latest essay on, and that speaks exactly to what we're speaking about today. Is to individuate and to become whole and to free ourselves from the mass infection.
So maybe I could get your comment on this, because we're in this Aquarian age now. Jung kind of spoke about the age of Pisces as being sort of like a split sign. There was the two halves of the Piscean age, and it completely repressed the shadow side of Virgo, right? And so with this Aquarian age coming in, we have the two rulers, Uranus and Saturn, but then we also have the opposite sign of Leo, which is, individual creativity. And so what do you see as troubles that we're going to get into with this new age, but also do you see that it's going to be more of an integration of that shadow side in the sign? Is that what a major solution would be, or how do you feel about that?
Well, again, this is a long hallway, a question with a long hallway, and I think we should make that our next visit. Like, because to really treat the subject matter, with full scope, really important to give that, because we can talk about this for another hour. I'm going to do this, this webinar next week on the 21st, 7 o'clock on West Coast time. We'll put a link to it. That's 2022 Deuces Are Wild, an archetypal perspective to the changing times. I'm going to talk a lot about that and give you a better sense of perspective. That's going to be a 2-hour lecture. We're going to try to share that with you, but if you can sign up for it, that'd be great. So we'll talk about that. And then let's do a video on that, but I won't, but I'll give a little bit of an attempt at answering the question shortly. So rephrase your question again, or give me your
Well,
question.
I'm just wondering if this Aquarian age is going to be more open to integrating that shadow side of Leo, that opposite sign. Like, because Liz Green mentioned it too, like she said that, she felt that integrating science with mysticism would be kind of what more the Aquarian age would be apt to do, rather than that Piscean one-sidedness. She kind of felt like that sign itself was sort of split, and so it couldn't deal with its own shadow side, and it just repressed all of the Virgoan traits and the feminine and all of that type of stuff.
Again, these are really complex points, and anything that you do, there's always a shadow to it, So the shadow of the age of Aquarius or the opposite of Aquarius is a Leo. And so we have the individual Leo. In Aquarius, we have the ideal community. If you have Aquarian ideal that does not respect the individual Leo, then you have fascism. And if you don't, if the individual doesn't have a community, then it's a really lonely experience. If you go on stage and you want to put on a performance, but there's nobody watching you, so you need both, and you need a balance. And in terms of psychological evolution, Jung has a beautiful quote that I use a lot when he introduces, because Jung is the one who first talked about the age of Aquarius. He in volume 10 of the collected works, in his introduction to his work on flying saucers, which is an incredible piece of work. These 4 essays on flying saucers, but Jung did in his introduction to that piece talks about what happens when we go from one age to the other. He calls it shift in the psychic dominance. So the psychic dominance, these archetypes, what are these archetypes? We look at archetypes as being something really complex, but really archetypes are psychic dominance. What does that mean? Well, we are very familiar with the word mother, and we have mother as my personal mother, but we have all kinds of conceptions: the great mother, the divine mother. If you look into the symbolism of mother and the archetypal structure of mother, now you're coming to a psychic dominant, the divine, the sacred feminine, the mothering nature that a man has. A man has also the archetype of mothering within himself. He can be a very mothering individual, or a woman can be a very paternal, it can be dominated by the paternal archetype. Or there's the divine son, one can, refuse to grow up and just identify with the divine child as an archetype. Or there's the wise man, or there's the Eteria, the beautiful woman, the charmer, the thief. These are all archetypal constituents of our psyche. And we can choose, and they're represented by planets, and we can choose to identify with one or the other depending on our psychic structure and our environmental, so these archetypal forms, when we go from one age to the other, Jung says, they go to a transformation. We've been seeing, a lot of young people now identified with the binary kind of existence, and that's not new. We have the archetype of Mercurius, who's hermaphroditic, the alchemist, they refer to him or her, and so this, and that goes back into history, the archetype of the hermaphrodite, both masculine and feminine. And so we have a shift in archetypal structure. That's what the healer and the dreamer is about. It's understanding the masculine energy as the great healer versus now the great abuser that we've created in our masculine, the superhero. Well, what if the masculine energy was identified with healing as its most important perspective? What would that do to our society? Same thing with the woman, the feminine, the moon being the dreamer, being connected with the unconscious and with spirit and with the darkness of nature. What if we made, so these are the shifts that take place when we go from one age to the other. And so a lot of Jung's work talks about what happened between the age of Aries and the age of Pisces, and his commentary is extensive on all the psychological changes that took place in that change of era. Then he told us, he says, like, that sounds like I'm a real freak right now, and I'm a doctor, and what am I doing talking about these things? But I'm doing that because I'm really worried about people not being prepared for this great shift that's taking place. And so that's really the essential contribution that Jung did in his work, is to prepare us for this change that we're going through right now, from the age of um, um, Pisces to the age of Aquarius. Now we can go into a lot, deeper details into the astrology of it all, and that's what I think we should do probably in our next
We
video.
should keep that for a separate video. Yeah, Liz Green says like the decay of the previous age is like the fertilizer for the next age, you know. We're sort of in that decay phase right now, I feel like. And yeah, that was a great explanation. Is there anything you want to talk about more before we end this, just about your own practice and that we didn't really go over?
Well, I think that we did, and again, I think that it leaves room for more discussion. I think, if anything, to, I mean, what, for me, what really drives the bus, while it's my Jungian work, but also what really is important to me, or the most important part of my practice. Yes, I do try to be engaged in giving an astrological perspective to the changing times, and that's really important. But it also is really the work that I do on a one-to-one basis. People see me in my lectures and in my talks, and they're really inspired, and they think, wow, but so what I like to tell people is, that energy that I bring to my work, it really finds its greatest expression in one-on-one work with individuals, where getting to understand yourself better. And so taking astrology seriously, and again informed with the psychology of Carl Jung and dream analysis, it's an experiment, and that I'm going through myself. And then I find that the greatest experience of it all happens in a personal reading. So, um, mm, so yeah, I recommend these kind of experiences, and I invite them, and I look forward to them. And as me and you, I mean, maybe you can say something about the work that we've done together, but, here we are exchanging this and doing videos together, so I think you would be a good one to speak to that.
Well, what I would suggest if people want to do and go and get a reading with you and do some work with you is record it, because sometimes you're so in that moment and there's a lot going on with the analysis that when I've gone back and re-listened to the sessions that we've done together, it's like, oh, that's what he meant there, because you're sort of tied up right in the moment and there's a lot going on. And then I've gone back and listened to our couple of readings together. One time we did a Zoom, and then the other time we did in person. I recorded it on a tape recorder, and just going back and listening to that a year later or 6 months later, it's really helped me integrate the lessons that you were sort of showing me there, and sometimes you can be in the moment, you won't see those connections, or you won't, oh, that's what he meant there. So record them, go back, re-listen to them, and just go out and get your reading. That's what I'd suggest. I'll put the links to your site below, and I would like to get a link to that presentation you're going to do on the 21st.
Yes, I'll give you that. My website right now is dormant. It's going down. So the YouTube or my personal email or my Facebook page is kind of how I interface with the world right now. But to reflect to what you were saying, in terms of the experience of one recording it. But I think that if anything that is becoming more alive in my practice is the dream work, and the work of active imagination. So to make art out of your dreams and to guide, that's the purely Jungian perspective to my work, which I'm seeking to grow more. And that is a different kind of relationship. You come to an astrologer, you get a reading, and then that kind of is a major point, turning point in your getting to know yourself. But then the follow up to it through dream analysis of collecting your dreams and meeting regularly to help you understand your dreams. That's the part of the practice that I'm growing more, and where because there's so much rich material that comes not just for the individual that I'm working with, but also for myself. But what I find is really difficult is that people have so little time to
Mhm.
actually dedicate themselves to a dream practice. And so, that's kind of the dissociation that we have to battle all the time. But I offer both, and what the extended dream work does is it gives you a lot of insight into what's going on within yourself, and getting the astrological perspective to the dreams is really valuable. And then maybe we should just do a whole video, so we do an Age of Aquarius one, and then we'll do something about dreams together. That
Well,
would be
we are
great.
going to plan that dream series, that essay by Jung, but I think we should do an introduction to that as well, because I've had some dreams, some what Jung calls big dreams, and if we were to analyze them, it's so profound. Like, I had a dream and I analyzed it, and it was like, I was kind of getting close, and then I had another dream that sort of confirmed that dream. It's totally wild how it works out. Like, the interpretation of these dreams are so amazing.
The interpretation, and I've mentioned a couple of times the active imagination, so you take the symbols that emerge in your dreams and you make art out of them. So I had this cat showed up in my dreams, and it's a complex dream, but the act of painting the cat was really helpful. And then he looks more like a fox in this one. But to actually make art out of your out of your dreams. This is my latest one. This statue came in my dream.
Cool.
And then
Well,
of
and
course, go ahead.
the act of just writing down your dreams, even if you don't go back and read them, that is gonna, you call it priming the pump. That's priming the pump for these more meaningful dreams to come out. Just writing it down, even if it's some cat scratch words, right? And then that active imagination and actually making art out of it is just the whole next level, right?
Absolutely. And it kind of becomes also, you got some dreams that come up and it's a plain perfect fairy tale. And again, as we go into dreams more in our videos, we'll share some personal dreams. Um, and
Yeah.
and
These dreams that I
and
had, you'll find them absolutely wild. You'll just love them.
well, that's what has, that's, and to see the synchronicity between dream work and the astrology and the transits that are going on in your chart, and all of that becomes such an incredible tool for self-analysis and for self-guidance. And so I think that was a really good introduction to our work. And thank you for doing this with me.
I think so as well, and I think it was well needed. So I hope people enjoy it, and we'll be doing more work in the future. I have Sarah DeHaven coming on in a couple of weeks here to talk about more astrological stuff and the crazy times. So look forward to that.
Cool, man. And
Yep.
yeah, let's keep it going.
Let's keep going
And
and keep priming the pump. I look
hallelujah.
forward to your presentation as well. I'll check that out on the 21st.
Yeah, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. I've been studying that really deeply, and give you a real bird's eye view of, the last, 10, 15 years, and what the next 5 years look like astrologically. And so to try to get you some context and some perspective on this incredibly powerful times.
Cool. Oh, I'm really glad in the direction this conversation went, and we kind of strayed here and there, but I think had some meaningful content. So I hope people enjoy it.
No script, no editing.
No, it's all good. I think
Just
it worked out
just
great.
raw me and you. Love it,
Yeah,
man. Thank
man.
you for your time in this.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for coming on. See
We'll
you,
talk to you
everyone.
soon.
Hope you enjoyed.